Okay, let's go.
I think if I make my kids listen to it again, I mean, they might revolt.
Right. Okay, so we are in Perek Aleph, Pasuk Aleph of Megillah Esther. Vayhi b'mei Ahasuerus. Those are the three words we spoke about at length last week. And the focus last week, to review Bekitzer, because we're going to be building on that, was that the story of the Megillah is told from the perspective of Ahasuerus. It's as if we care so much about him, the beginning and the end of the Megillah, and that's supposed to be read in a certain sense ironically, or as if Ahasuerus is the anti-hero, because we really would have liked and expected the story to be written from our perspective had we not been under the kingdom of Ahasuerus, rather have been led to our redemption by Zerubbabel, by the king from David.
I don't think you mean anti-hero.
I do. No? Okay.
No.
Fine. So
But
we'll
you
talk
mean-
about
you
afterwards
mean
what
he's
anti-hero
not-
means.
right,
No, he's the hero of the story.
Even though he's
No,
not,
but he stands
not
for...
our
He's right. He's the...
that's not the same as anti-hero.
Anti-hero means he's the hero of the story as it's written,
Yeah.
but he stands for something else.
That's not
No.
what an anti-hero means.
Stands for something... I'm not saying he stands for another person. He stands for something negative. That's an anti-hero. No?
No.
So what's an anti-hero? Tell me what an
An
anti-hero is.
anti-hero is someone who is the hero of the story and he does the good things, except his motivations are suspect, etc. But he does
Right. So
So
we're supposed to read... Oh, okay. You're saying... Right. I'm saying we're supposed to read it as...
right.
All right.
Now he's not supposed to be the
Right,
hero.
right, okay,
That's why
fine.
He's the anti-hero. He's
Okay,
not
fine.
supposed to be the hero. He's
Right.
He's really
Good.
an antagonist.
He's a
who
usurper.
he's a
Well,
usurper.
yeah,
Right.
not so much antagonist, but no, I'm saying we're
More
supposed
like
to...
an anti-villain.
No, I'm not saying this.
Yeah.
I wasn't saying Zoshav. I was saying anti-hero. I was saying we're supposed to read this as, look how terrible his kingdom is. That's the whole point.
Right.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah.
Because of the whole background of really it's
He's
not
an
the
antagonist,
right,
but he's not a
right,
hero. Right.
okay. Anyways, just that's a brief review of last week's shir. Now let's read on. So the pasuk tells us who this person is, and again we always have to try to wean ourselves off from how familiar we are with the pasuk. We're so used to it, we sometimes don't notice obvious things. And I think in this case, hu Achashverosh haMolech mehodavat Kush, it tells us the extent of his rule. Okay, and again, we're so used to this pasuk. The extent of his rule was from Hoidu till Kush, and how many Medidas Shav Medina. However, what it doesn't tell us, it doesn't say Achashverosh king of Paras and Madai, which you would think, if we're identifying him, first thing you would say is he was king of Paras and Madai. That's who he was. So, but the pasuk never tells us who he was. The pasuk tells us what he did. He was the one who ruled. And the other Gemara in Megillah says, "Oh, haMolech," but he wasn't really Ro'i to be Melech. He took the rule. In other words, by the pasuk describing what he did and not what he was, that suggests that maybe he doesn't belong doing what he's doing because this is not his identity. We're not going to call him the king of Persia. We're going to tell you what he did. He ruled over this great and mighty, extensive kingdom. Okay, so I just want to point it out. Why is that significant? Why are we framing it as what he did? And then we have the Shevav Esem Umei Medina. Of course, that's a tremendous kingdom. Now, what's with this number? Shevav Esem Umei Medina. So we don't find this number anywhere else, except for, of course, we find it by Sarah. Sarah Imenu lived for 127 years. And the famous Medrash, the Rabbi Kiva said that Esther is the descendant of Sarah, who lived for 127 years, and Esther should now rule over 127 Medinas, because she is the descendant of Sarah who lived 127 years. And the question is, I think, what are you thinking? She had a lot of grandparents.
Right.
Yeah,
Also,
Esther had a lot of grandparents.
Also, did she really rule? Also,
Okay.
Connection.
Yeah, what's the connection? Right, what's the connection? Okay, yes, there was one person. All right, so she's also the granddaughter of Avraham, who lived to 175. Look what Sheikhs. Okay, that's the question. It happens to be, right, it happens to be that Yitzchak is 180. We talk, I have 180 next few psukim, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's the son of Sarah.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I think in the Medrash it's not clear whether Rekiva meant it just to wake the Elam up as a joke, but there's a Medrash where Shmuel ben Achmeni says it and said quite seriously. There's drasha that since she's the descendant of Sarah. But regardless, it is a fact that this unique number, which we don't find anywhere else in the description of the Malchus, and according to Alandi, we can't even find evidence for this. It's striking that it says that there are so many, and there were many, but we don't know that there were that many. Okay, say that.
Also, how do you count them?
How do you count them? Of course, right. Is Medina a technical term? Maybe there's different ways to count it. You have a whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's the city-states also. Like if you look back 2,500 years ago, whatever. I mean, like Megillah was a Medina.
Yeah. Well, it could be right. No, but there were right, but no, but in other contexts. Yeah, but we do seem to have evidence what Medina is about. Okay, I don't know anything about this, so let's just leave that. The point is, 127 is an interesting number. It's interesting that the Megillah even tells us the number of Medinas once it told us the extent of the kingdom. And this number does appear in one of the places in Tanakh in the days of Sarah. So is there a kesher as Chazal indeed assert? Okay. So we'll get to that soon. Now, Medina, the fact that there's 127 Medinas, of course, the whole concept of a Medina in the Megillah is very, very prominent, right? We always have all the Medinas Malchusa, and each Medina. I counted it 39 times. Medina, Chasava, and it actually says the word 3 times in a row, right? Yeah. Call Medina, sent letters to Kaliva, call Medina, Medina. Medina, yeah. Right. So we have the word 3 times in a row. Okay. The word Medina appears, as I count, in my count, 39 times in the Megillah. And it seems to be very important word. And of course, there is an Am Echad that's not in one Medina, but it's referred to all the Medinas. So this idea, okay, has all these Medinas, so many different Medinas. I mean, each Medina is different, right? And each Medina has maybe some sort of association with Am Va'am, and Medina. But then we have this Am that is not associated with any particular Medina. Okay, so the point of Medinas is going to figure very prominently in the beginning. Okay, fine. So good. So now let's going back to HaMelech, right? So we said the pasuk doesn't tell us who he was. The pasuk tells us what he did, which suggests that maybe he doesn't belong there. And we're not going to tell you what he was. We're not going to tell you he was the legitimate king. We're going to tell you what happened, what he did. He ruled. It's a verb. So again, as we mentioned, we're supposed to read this Megillah as an alternative, as one alternative out of 2, and the b'di'evidik alternative is by Yud Achashverosh. The superior alternative would have been that we're not under Achashverosh, but rather under Zerubbabel. So here, look. So here's going to be the pasuk. Here's this King Ahasuerus, who really should not be king, because you want the king to be from Yehuda. But he was de facto. He was in fact Lamaisi. He was king. Hamelech. He did it. Okay. So now, reading the first pasuk from that perspective, that sets us up for thinking. Okay, here you have this person who did such and such. He took the kingdom, and by saying he took the kingdom or he ruled, you're suggesting for the possibility that maybe he shouldn't be ruling. So now, okay, that leads us to start reading further and saying, well, let's see, how did he do? Did his malchus work? Okay, so partially we spoke about this last week. We're supposed to read the Megillah as this hapless king, but I want to focus this week on Parak Aleph, which continues in this description of him being l'chayra, a powerful king. But there's a whole major problem in his kingdom. So what I'm going to suggest now is that Parak Aleph is a hemshich of what Pasuk Aleph sets up. Pasuk Aleph sets up, you have this king who he is actually acting as king. That means to say he's trying to do something. It's like setting up an agenda or a goal. He wants to be melech. He's trying to be melech. Let's see if this person who was acting as king, let's see if he succeeded. And Parak Aleph is going to show you where the cracks begin in his malchus, and then what I'm going to suggest is that the Megillah puts the malchus back together through the medium of Esther and brings us back to the May of Esther B'Shem Medina and associated with the Sarah. But we'll get to that soon, okay? But I want to say, once you read the first pasuk as it's not a comment of who he was, HaMelech, but it's rather telling us what he was doing. That really sets us up for, look how he was doing it. He was sitting al kisei malchus. You see, it's obvious that the pasuk, in other words, is not just a description. Once upon a time there was a king. Which king? King Pliny from Pliny. And once upon a time during his kingdom he made a party and he had a problem with his wife. No, that's not what this pasuk is. There was a king who's attempting to be melech. He's trying to accomplish something, and therefore we see kishevas al kisei malchusai. Okay, he thinks that his reign, which the first pasuk set up as some objective that he's trying to achieve, he thinks he achieved that, and to demonstrate that he makes a great party, which is going to l'chayra demonstrate how powerful and wealthy he is, but everything's going to fall apart because something went wrong. Okay, so that's how we read Pasuk Aleph leads. It's about the Maluch. Exactly. So the party is not right. Exactly. The party is not merely something that happened during his reign. The party is part of how he is being Melech, and that's why the first pasuk has it as a verb, and doesn't just label him as king of Persia and Madai, because that's not the point. The point is there's a vast kingdom, and requires a good king. It requires a kind of rule that's going to work. Here's the guy who was doing it. And which suggests that he's trying to accomplish it. And Taka, let's see how he did so. So he thinks, okay, here I got it. You've got this Ahasuerus, you've got the kingdom. Let's make a big party and demonstrate that. And this is like showing how that doesn't quite work. And we'll soon see how that leads into the whole Megillah story. We mentioned last week about the Kisei Machusei, which Chazal says the Kisei of Shlomo is because there's a competition between him and the Malchei Beis David. And likewise, in the party, he shows Osher Kavod Malchusei. Now, who was the other king that had Osher and Kavod? That's Shlomo. Right. Shlomo requested Chachma. And Hashem told him that because you asked for Chachma, I'm going to give you Chachma, but I'm also going to give you Osher and Kavod. Right. He asked for a Leiv Shemea. So I'm going to give you a Leiv Chacham v'Navain. So here pointed the Ahasuerus is showing off his Osher and Kavod, but he proves to be severely lacking in Chachma, and he's led by the nose by his advisors, and does stupid things, right? As we shall see, as we all know. Okay, so there's this number one question of whether he's roy to be king. And Osher and Kavod are major trappings of Melucha, but as we learn from Shlomo, those are not the real mile of a melech is to have a leiv chacham. Ahasuerus shows Osher and Kavod, but clearly lacks the leiv chacham, so it shows that he's not roy Melucha. And furthermore, it shows that he loses his competition with the Malchei Beis David. He doesn't match up to the Malchei Beis David, who are supposed to be Chachonim. Okay, so let's read Perek Aleph in this light. So here's this king who's going to rule, who supposedly would rule from Hodevid Kush on this great kingdom, and he's sitting on his Kisei Malchus, and he's going to make a party to show that he's right to be king and how great he is. And then we get to Pasuk Tes. Everything is great. Everything is great till Pasuk Ches. Everyone is happy because the king commanded Al Kol Rav Beisai. So the house of the king seems to be under control. Then, thank you, Pasuk Tes. Vashti Hamalka, so Mishtenos and Beis Hamalchos. Besides for Vashti Hamalka, there's also, besides for Ahasuerus, there's also Vashti. So another part of this kingdom, or another factor in this kingdom. Ahasuerus is doing something, Al Kisei Malchusai, and Rav Beisai, that's his party. But there's another counterparty, I don't know, counterparty going on in the Beis HaMalchus, and that's Vashti.
Incidentally, she's on the inside. He seems
what?
Okay.
He'll tell you literally the spot in Iran. You can look it up. Literally, he's like, here's where it was. Okay, I'm just saying, you can show you a picture. Here's exactly where the woman's party was. I don't know. I'm just saying, it's pretty cool. Okay, new check. So everything is going great, right? However, Vashti doesn't show up. So here are the cracks. No, I'm not saying you're wrong. So it happens to be very, very interesting. Here, the cracks in his malucha, in his plan to be melech, begin to appear. Okay, and so what do we have to do? In other words, how do we support this malchus? Right. So reading Perek Aleph, so it's like a parody. Here you have this king who thinks he's going to be king over this vast empire that comprises not just describing the geographical point, it's saying how vast it was, 127 medinas, and look, he can't even rule over his wife. Okay, this is the problem.
I mean, in other words,
maybe he's not the king. Maybe he's not really a king.
The thing about it is that it's not that he can't rule over his wife, that he loses his temper, gets upset with
Yeah.
his wife, and next thing you
He
know,
will himself out.
and now he's sad and he's upset.
Yeah.
Basically he messed up.
He messed up. He can't control. Yeah, because he can't even manage his house. Okay, at least that, right? He can't even manage his own personal affairs. Here's the king over this great kingdom who can't even manage his own personal affairs, and that revolves around the woman. Lapachas, we could say that, right? The reason why I said it this way is because this is how the story goes in the end of the parak. When Muchim comes and says, "Okay, we have to set straight who's king of the house, right?" But the parody really goes weiter. Why does the parody continue? Because I'm not going to say parody. I mean to say is like you're supposed to read the Megillah. You read the Megillah. And it's like what a joke. Okay, he sends out a rule. The law is what's the law? Aliyas kalish base. Okay, from now on, whenever the man says something, you have to listen. Okay. It's like a federal crime now, right? They're going to get you with a federal crime because you didn't pass the salt. I mean, and the Chayr is supposed to be a joke. It's not supposed to be a joke. And it's a double joke. I mean, the parody continues. The parody of the king who, the Chayr should be king. As we spoke about last week, that Megillah is a sort of parody because Lemaisa were under the Persians. So on the one hand, we have to say about this great king. On the other hand, we're showing how terrible it is to be under this king. And it's not the king you want to be under. So it's a little bit of a hidden parody for that reason, but it should. I think it's.
You're saying Lemaisa when they wrote it.
Like literally when they wrote it. Literally they wrote it. There were censors. Ahasuerus read it. He's like, okay, cool, makes me look good, whatever. And because he didn't know how to read that well, whatever. It's right. But in other words,
why did they all approve of it?
Who? The Sarim?
Yeah.
Because they didn't read
I don't know.
it.
No, what about the Sarim? Okay, no, he wants to know the Sarim. Okay, I don't know. The Sarim. What the Sarim want?
Competition. If he's trying to bring them under his authority by showing he's the power.
Who's he?
The power.
Ahasuerus?
Ahasuerus. He's trying to say, I'm the power.
Right.
You're subject to me. If they can undermine him, they get more. Prestige back.
The Sarim, right? So that's why they didn't object. You saying?
Maybe.
Yeah. I was
like
thinking
the idea.
Could be.
That he's going to look silly. And they get more prestige back.
Could be.
It could be.
Yeah, lots of things could be. Obviously, Yeah. Lots of things could be. In other words, in terms of the Ma'aseh Kachaya, how'd they get away with this? You could speculate all sorts of things. But I think that the point is we're supposed to read it that way. And the fact that we're supposed to read it that way makes sense, given that we're writing about a king that we don't really want to be under, right? So in other words, this is fundamentally different than all Kisvei HaKodesh. I mean, maybe there's other ones like this, but typically we're writing about how we want things to be. Here we're writing about how things were in the B'diavad situation, so it's not surprising then that it's...
Although you're picking
like
Ahasuerus, because the Kodesh things are different.
Right.
He has a hands-off attitude toward personal matters. Worship as you like.
Right.
Household systems, whatever your usual local culture is. Yeah. I'm just making laws for the empire.
Yeah. I mean, look, things worked under Kodesh, right?
That's the wise version of this.
Yeah, exactly. That's the one. That's the king that worked. Exactly. There's a malach that works where we're not going to be focusing too much on Kodesh. We'll just tell everyone that he gave us permission and say, then forget about him. But if there's a whole thing happening under Ahasuerus, so that means we are more meshub with him than we want to be, or he is doing more to us than we want him to do. So then the story is from that perspective.
Because he's not as wise.
Yeah, exactly, right. Because he's not the Melech Chacham. Because look what his Melucha looks like, right. So now I want to tell you it's a double parody. Why? Because firstly, as I said, what kind of solution is this? To make a law that everyone is saying, it doesn't really solve the problem, just to make a law, to write a law. And secondly, or maybe this is firstly, the king who can't manage his house and is not soirer, what happens is that he's led around by his sarim. And how does he let around by the sarim? Because Memuchan tells him, so in other words, Memuchan says like this. Memuchan says that this is not a personal matter between you and your wife. This is a general question about the Sarais Parasum Modai. This is a whole battle between the sexes, and there's not going to be any Sarara if we don't take care of this, right? So what happens is then Ahasuerus, who's not Soira Bebeisai, it ends up being led around by his own Sarim and tell him what to do, and then Zachar Vashi Sasa, and maybe he regrets it. And that's the whole story of the Megillah. Basically, whenever someone comes to Ahasuerus with an idea, he's like, fine, good idea. So that means, what that sets us up for is that here's the Malucha of a king, supposedly a great king, or should be trying to be a great king, can't even manage his household, doesn't even rule over his wife, will tried to rule over his wife, making a law, which is a joke. And we'll see it's very important because it didn't actually work. We'll see about that soon. Even when he makes this comeback to power, it's not truly a coming back to power because he's actually still being led by the nose just by other people. Mm-hmm. So this is Parak Aleph of the Megillah, which sets us up for a power vacuum, essentially, to ask a question. Who is going to ultimately rule this kingdom? See, that's what I'm saying. Parak Aleph.
Choose somebody to do it for him.
Well, or someone's going to take advantage. Maybe Haman, right?
Well,
maybe Esther. This is where I'm getting. That ultimately Esther has the final word. So in other words, the Parak Aleph of the Megillah is setting up. Okay, Ahasuerus is Megillah. So again, I think it's good I understand this very well. It's not describing which Ahasuerus Tams. You should know Yen Ahasuerus. Then it would have said who Ahasuerus, Melech Parsa Madai, Ben Pliny, whatever. It would have told us that. That's not the point. The point is, think of it like this. There's this guy called Ahasuerus who attempted to be Melech and thought he had a glorious kingdom that he has to. He had all this territory that he has to manage. It's very vast and numerous, Medinas, and he thinks he's going to take control, but he cannot. He just proves to be impotent at having managing his own house, so he doesn't have control. So Mela, there's a power vacuum which the Sarim try to fill. And by the way, the fact that Mamuchan is Haman now, I think it says in a good light, because the point is this is about a power struggle. And of course, the alternative to Mordechai and Esther, the whole Megillah is about a power struggle because the Melech is a Shvacha Melech, not really a Melech. Look at his Melucha. So who is going to actually take the reins? First one who attempts to do so is Mamuchan. He's the first one to speak up, which is, like I said, that's probably has to do with the fact that we say Mamuchan is Haman, because Haman is the alternative to be Gidal HaMelech, right? And actually try to even put the king's throne, right? When the king asks him, what should we do to the person Hashem Melech Bikara? He says, give him this and that, and put the crown on his head, which pointedly Ahasuerus left that out when he told him to do it to Mordechai. But the point is, Haman had these very grand designs, right?
And in the end,
the Gemara says, right? The Gemara says that
becomes Mordechai who has the crown on his head.
Right. So I'm going to say, Right. So I'm going to say it's Esther, but of course Mordechai and Esther goes together. She's working with him, but right. Also, of course, the Gemara says that one of Esther's reasons to invite Haman was that the king should think they're planning against him. Basically, Haman is a contender for the king's power, and the king's power in Parag Aleph is being shown to be quite shaky, and there's the possibility, and there's the opening for someone to take power. Okay, so I want to say like this. I want to say basically the Parak Aleph that shows that the king is not Soirer because he doesn't have a wife, or he can't control his wife, which means there's two things now. Number one, we need a Soirer, and number two, we need a wife. And those two problems are going to be solved by the same person, Esther, who's going to be the new wife, and she's going to be the Sarah. Okay, to bring back the Sarah. She's going to be the true Sar, the Besa, because the Megillah is going to end. The whole Megillah is about who calls the shots. Ultimately, the final word is going to go to Mordechai and Esther. So that's the setup over here. We're looking for someone to have the final word and make decisions in this kingdom. And because the king's not doing a good job of that. And the other thing the king's not doing is managing his wife. So that we need a new wife. The new wife is going to be the person. And she's going to end up being the true Melech, the true brains, let's say, behind the king. Okay? Good. Furthermore, the parak ends with, part of the decree was, Lios Kilish Soiba. Basically, Umedaber Kilishoin Amai. Umedaber Kilishoin Amai. So what does that mean? That means that if you have a bilingual couple, a dual language couple, where he speaks one language, or she speaks the other one, then they'll speak the language of the man. Okay? This also changes in the end of Megillah, because in the end of Megillah, where the letters went out, it says that they went out to Medina, and Am Sava, Ve'ala Yehudim Kirsavam B'chil Shoinam. Right. So Ahasuerus is sending letters in the language of his wife. Okay? Which is, the rule was...
You send letters to the
right.
in all languages.
Right. No, but I know, we'll get back to this. I think there's a point there. Because that the fact that is mefuzim mefayrod, in other words, the reason why he's writing a letter to the Yehudim b'chsavam b'chil shaynam is because of his wife. It's not. In other words, originally they weren't considered a Medina or an Am that receives a Kichsam Moshem because they were Mefuzim Mefarid. They just didn't fit into anything. They weren't one of the Amim and the Medinas because they weren't associated with any Medina.
That mentioned earlier.
I think so. Right. Exactly. Right. He didn't send to them. Why? Not because it's anti them. I think it's because they're not. Because they're an Am Echad Mefuzim Mefarid. They don't fit into this whole structure of the Sheva Vesem Medina, which roughly corresponds to Am V'Am, more or less, probably. You'd think, right? Each Am gets a Medina. Okay, maybe it's not 127 Am, but something like that. Here you have this Am that's Mefuzim Mefarid. They don't fit in. And that's, I think, part of what the first pasuk is doing. By saying Shem Vesem Medina, we mentioned that there's all these Medinas in the Megillah, because it's setting up, it's Shem Vesem Medina, so then everyone has to have a place. Now, that's a problem, because it is a nation that doesn't belong in any of the Shem Vesem Medina, or whatever, or maybe they belong in Israel, but they weren't. They were Mefuzim Mefarid, so now we have a shtickle problem. Okay? The problem is going to be solved by them getting an identity, by being treated as an entity because of Esther. So then the fact that he's writing to them is very significant because the whole entity, the whole consideration of them as a discrete Am is due to the fact that he's just being led around by his wife, which is exactly what Parak Aleph is saying. Let's not do that anymore. So in that sense, right? In that sense, I think there is you could draw that connection.
That's the anti-Haman though.
What?
Parak Aleph was Haman. That was Haman's rule is
right.
Don't listen to your wife.
Exactly. Haman's rule is don't listen to your wife. Right. Exactly. And listen to me, basically, right? Listen to me. And Ahasuerus, and he's like, that wasn't such a good idea. But Lamaisa Haman was the one who was calling the shots. And Ahasuerus, Bekitza can't listen to anyone. Always listens to someone. Haman's like, okay, don't listen to your wife, listen to me. And the Megillah is going to be like, okay, you know what? He's going to have the beginning of a new wife, and then he's going to listen to her.
Well,
and that's going to be the final word.
Also, arguably, he started with the Sarim and then he went back to his wife.
Who?
He started listening to the Sarim.
Ahasuerus, right?
Mimochan,
Right.
Haman.
Uh-huh.
And then he goes to Mordechai and Esther. He goes back to his wife.
Yeah.
To the household.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. He goes back to it. Right. So in other words, Vashti is a problem. If it wouldn't have been Vashti, everything would have been fine. Why? Because he would have listened to his wife. Okay. I don't know.
Maybe.
What does that mean? If he would have invited her and she would have said, "I'm not coming," he would say, "Okay, I'm not. I don't know. I'm not sure. Whatever. Exactly how it would have happened."
Maybe if he had worked out whatever things. If she hadn't been Vashti, she would have gotten along with him better. Maybe they would have worked out together.
Yeah. Something. Right.
Front. She would have told him what to do. He would have
Right. Okay, so Bekitzer, Esther is the Sar. So in other words, Parak Aleph is about Surah. Yeah, that's right. Parak Aleph is about the Sarim, and Esther is the true Sar. So like I said, that brings us back to Sarah. Okay. So now I want to tell you how Mamish Sarah is exactly who belongs here in the story, and not just that. Vayiyu Chai Yisar Me'er Shana V'Esem Shana Sheva Shana. How's it go? Vayiyu Chai Yisar. Right? How that pasuk is really mamish where the Megillah, in a certain sense, starts. Where that pasuk takes us conceptually, the Megillah starts in there. Here's why. Because what's the story about? What's the story about? Ahasuerus. We're in Golos. We're under Ahasuerus. We're spread out in the 127 Medinas. We're not supposed to be. We're supposed to be in Eretz Yisrael, right? We're supposed to be under Zerubbabel. As Chagai said, that's the way it's supposed to be. Instead, we have Ahasuerus. Now, why? Why? Because I have a question, right? Why are we not in Eretz Yisrael? Why are we in Golos? Or to go back, so we have to go back to Bereshis. Why did Navtachat Avraham, Lachrat Shareka, where did it go wrong? Such that we keep on going back, try again Meraglim, and then Meraglim doesn't work out, so meaning we did a chait, and then we have to go to Golos again, and we're still in Golos. Where did Avram not succeed?
Zerubbabel went back, and yet it still didn't succeed. Build the base Mikdash,
right?
You can't build.
Right. Exactly. Zerubbabel doesn't work. Right?
Mordechai went back, and comes back.
He comes back. Right. So why are we here? Why is everything not working? Avram was promised Eretz Yisrael. So where do things go wrong? Tell me after, please. So where do things go wrong, such that we're always attempting again and again? Yeah, that's the question. So for that, we go back to Bereshis. Vashtet in Bereshis. We have to think about like this. We have to think about how would it have worked? Let's say Avram's mission would have succeeded spectacularly and perfectly. What would that have looked like? Okay, so Avram was told Lech Lecha Eretz Shareka. Okay, go to Eretz Yisrael. Good. Now, does that give him Eretz Yisrael? Does that make that Eretz Yisrael? Says no, because there's another Lech Lecha, the end of Parshas Vayera, Lech Lecha Eretz Hamaria, right? Which stems, it parallels the fact that the Mishnah in Ksubah is Hakol Malam Eretz Yisrael, Hakol Malam Yerushalayim. In other words, there are two journeys that he has to make. You have to make a journey to Eretz Yisrael, very good. But now you still have to go to Yerushalayim. So there are two places that Avraham has to get to, two places with Kudoshim that Avraham has to find, that Avraham has to journey towards to achieve his goal. Okay? So Lech Lecha Eretz Hamaria, that's when Avraham finally gets to the Mokim, to the holiest place in Eretz Yisrael, and that's when his Kinyan on Eretz Yisrael should be complete. And indeed he announces this is going to be the Beis HaMikdash. It's going to be the Beis HaMikdash. That's how Parashat Vayera ends, right? Har Shem Yirah. So now, if Avram's travels were done and he arrived in the Makom HaMikdash, so now it's time for him to take possession of Eretz Yisrael, which he does in the beginning of Chayei Sarah. He buys something in Eretz Yisrael. But what should he buy? He should buy the Makom HaMikdash. Yeah. Right? And as we spoke, it's in my sefer in Oz Yaakov, I think, right? Oz Yaakov. This whole negotiation between Avram and Ephraim is paralleled in a similar negotiation between David and Aravna, also buying something from a guy when he actually buys the Makom HaMikdash. Right. And when did David buy the Makom HaMikdash from Aravna? When David counted the people, and there was a Magefa, and David saw the Malach that was killing the people, and he said, "Kill me, not these sheep, the people." Right. And then God, the Navi told him, "Go build a Mizbeach," which is parallel to that Kedah. Right. When a person sacrifices himself instead of the sheep, then now consecrate the Makom HaMikdash, and there David.
That's parallel to Ayat HaChazbunai.
Yeah, to Ayat HaChazbunai, exactly. What? Ayaseh. Ayaseh lo'ila. Ayaseh. That says Yitzchak. Beseder. You're willing to give a Yitzchak instead of a Seh, so now let's bring a carbon. Yeah. So David brings himself, says, "Take me instead of the sheep." There it's people, but he kills all them sheep. Yeah. So then say bring a carbon. And then David makes a negotiation similar to a Rav negotiation, very, very parallels. Rabbi Bachar pointed out a certain amount of money, and a Rav says, "I'll give it to you for free," and David says, "No, I'm paying for it." Right? All the parallels are there, but he actually buys the Makom HaMikdash. Okay, why? Because you do that Kedah, and now you get this Ayal Tachas B'nai. You bring a carbon. Once you do self-sacrifice, you could bring the carbon. So buy the Mikdash, right? So why is Avraham Avinu buying Chevron, right? By the way, just parenthetic, it's all the Sefer in Oz Yaakov. David counting the people was what was a catalyst for all this. That's because that Kedah ends that the children should be Kechoich ve'ashamayim. So by David counting them, he's undermining that they're like stars, and he has to redo that Kedah, but he redoes that Kedah, now we get the Makom HaMikdash. So yet Avraham Avinu, instead of buying the Makom HaMikdash, he does indeed buy something after that Kedah, which is very appropriate because Lech Lecha is complete. He did his two Lech Lechas. He went to Eretz, he went to Beis HaMikdash, now buy Eretz Yisrael. But instead of buying the Makom HaMikdash, he buys Kever. Which suggests then that the Akedah, which is supposed to achieve the last step of Avram's mission, is supposed to be the Akedah, and that's the Lahar Maria. And then he's supposed to take Bimisnachel, the Oretz, and get the Makom HaMikdash. He didn't. Instead, he got a place of graves. That means that the Akedah did not succeed. Avram did not succeed. Or what could have happened, Akedah was not perfectly successful. And that's what Chazal say when they say that the Satan went and caused Sarah to die. This whole business of the Satan is a major player in that Kedah. Avram is doing battle with the Satan, as it were. The Satan needs him to do. Avram needs to do this in order to vanquish the Satan. The Satan is not completely vanquished because even though Avram passed his test of that Kedah, the Satan, who's also the Malach HaMaves, played a role. We still had some Makim, Vayuchai Sarah, and Sarah died. So the death of Sarah is what undermines and suggests that perhaps Avraham Avinu's dream and mission of Lech Lecha will not be achieved, right? At least then it wasn't completed, and maybe it will never be achieved. Maybe the same way Avraham Avinu couldn't do it. Maybe no one's ever going to do it. Okay, now
so David does by the
right. David does. Now before David HaMelech, there's the Meraglim, because it goes like this. Ephraim said to Avraham, Ephraim's offer is dirt. Ephraim said to Avraham, "This Eretz beini ubein chomachi." And the omits of that is Ephraim is telling Avraham, here you have this whole idea, you're going to make a holy land. This event of the death of your wife proves that there's no thing as a holy land. The land is dirt. And therefore, me and you, it's all the same thing. Between me, offer, you're Nasi Elikim, and I'm offer, Hainu Hach. When it comes to land, we're all the same, because land is not a holy thing. Land is not heavenly. Land cannot be made heavenly. There's always going to be a Satan on the earth. There's all these things you have to really think what they mean. But this is Mamish Bekitzer Nimritz, and therefore there's no such thing as a holy land. And the Meraglim who were charged with the mission of Isavos Arts, Mahi, they're picking up from that debate of Ephraim and Avram. Ephraim said, Beini u'beincha Mahi, and that's the end of Avram's mission, of his objective, of his dream. And the Meraglim are there to see whether in fact we could pick up where Avram left off, or maybe not. And that's why the Gemara says, Kalev went to Cheven, went to Marsa Machpelah, because the death of Sarah, the death and the burial of Sarah is the crux of the question of Eretz Yisrael. The reason why we are in Galus, in other words, if you look at the Torah, where do we see this concept that we may not achieve Eretz Yisrael? Okay? So now that's why it brings us mamish to Esther. Because if not for let's say Sarah wouldn't have died. In other words, that Akedah would have been successful. Ligamri. Successful Ligamri means we'll build a Beis HaMikdash. The story of the Megillah, which is the story of coming back to the Beis HaMikdash. We didn't speak about this so much last week, but we know it's the time of the Beis HaMikdash. This is my second Sefer Mishas Yaakov. The whole story is, are we going to get back to the Beis HaMikdash? And as we spoke last week, in Ezra, the Gzer of Haman is described as a sitna neged Yeshiva Yerushalayim, that we're going to build a Beis HaMikdash. That's how it's described in Sefer Ezra. It's a problem, we can't build a Beis HaMikdash. So the story of the Megillah, as you mentioned, they came back, they went to Eretz Yisrael already, right? And they came back to, Mordechai was in Eretz Yisrael already. He came back, he went to Eretz Yisrael the first time, and he came back to Shushan, to Shtadlanis, to be poilus with the king. So the story of the Megillah's Esther is the story of how we got the Persians to allow us to build the Beis HaMikdash. And the way we got them to allow us to build the Beis HaMikdash is because Esther's there, and Esther's the queen, and her son is Dayavish, he's the one who gave permission, according to Chazal. I mean, he's the one who gave permission to resume the building. According to Chazal, he's the son of Esther. Okay? So the story of the Megillah is how we're going to... That's me? Okay? The story of the Megillah is how we're going to attain how we're going to get permission to build the Beis HaMikdash from the Persian kings, right? So now, this brings us back Mamish to Chayesar. Why? Because Be'etzem Avram had the second Lech Lecha. So what's supposed to happen? The Beis HaMikdash. He's supposed to be kind of Beis HaMikdash. He doesn't, because Akedah is not completely successful. So therefore we don't have the Beis HaMikdash. So now, that's why Yuchayesar Meir Shana Vesem Shalom Sheva Shanim. Now we have again faced with the problem that we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. That's the problem that the Megillah is here to solve. Problem is, we're under the Persians who don't let us build a Beis HaMikdash. What are we going to do? As it's described in Sefer Ezra. So therefore, the fact that there's a reference to the 127 years of Sarah is mamish the most appropriate thing. Because Esther is going to be the key to bringing back or fixing that same problem that's represented with the death of Sarah. Okay? Mamish, there's nothing that's more shaykh to this. So, okay.
But she does it through the Persians.
So right. So 1 second. So now, right. So first of all, one thing which I'm not going to talk about because it's just an Arichas Gedolah and it's not so important. Why is the Isha so significant for Eretz Yisrael? Okay. Why is Sarah Taka the linchpin? For this question, is that so holy or not, all revolves around Sarah and her death. Why is that? What does that mean? And why is Torah Isha? Okay, that's obviously very important, especially because, as we said, there's this whole debate over here between the Isha and the Isha and the Megillah. Okay, so it's important to understand what that is about, but I'm not going to go into that. But, right, I just want to say, just pointing at the parallel, that the Geula depends on the Isha, and here too, so as Shalom said, here the Geula is a partial Geula. It's not a Geula that we actually have our own king. But the Isha, at least we have our own queen. At least we have the right Isha, and since the problem, as it happened in Bereshis, happened through the Isha, the death of Sarah, so Esther is going to be picking up or dealing with that same issue, and she's going to be fixing it from the aspect of the Isha, so that we have a partial Geula, and we're able to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. We get permission to build the Beis HaMikdash. So she then rules over the 127 Medinas, and that allows us to have the Surah that we need. So again, so the point is the Pasuk sets up that we're lacking Surah. There's a problem with this kingdom, which creates a power vacuum, which is going to be filled by Esther. And that's going to make Esther into the true Sarah, the Sar. She has the Sarah. She's the one who actually has control. So even though Ahasuerus is not David, that's somewhat okay, but not Malchus based David, because we have Esther, and by having Esther, we have a kind of Geula that allows us to build a Beis HaMikdash that we would have built if Sarah had not died. Okay, so yes, it's not a complete Geula because we don't have the king from David. We're taka we made under the Persians, but we have something due to the koyach of Esther. Okay, that's the Torah. Good.
Yep. But you're saying.
Follow? You got it?
No, I got it.
Yeah.
But so then that makes a virtue of Ahasuerus' failings. Because he's weak and he's led around by somebody, if you can get in and be the somebody who leads him,
Yeah, it's great. What do you mean? Of course.
then it becomes a bit.
Yeah.
It's not inherently a virtue.
No, it's a virtue if you could be Esther,
You
right?
can take over.
It's bad if we be Haman, right? It's a problem with
It
Haman.
was terrible, but then it becomes Esther.
Right.
So my
Right.
question
But
is
it's only
like
through
this.
him, and therefore it's not ideal. Whatever, we're still working on that.
Avraham Avinu's Beis HaMikdash would have been permanent.
Yep.
So how is Esther's shadow of Beis HaMikdash somehow fulfilling the permanence of Avraham's Beis HaMikdash?
No,